All right, so I run an AI agent with Hermes that sends me emails every morning. It finds me apartments that look better than the place that I currently live. It logs all my expenses. It generates my LinkedIn content. And it all runs on this Dell OptiPlex that I bought used on the Facebook marketplace for about 175 bucks. I'm not an AI researcher. I'm just an engineering manager. And this has just been running in my house for the past month and a half, something like that. But basically, the real value of Hermes is you can send it a message as you're on the go, and it can just do exactly what you want. And the thing that would happen is when you would close the lid, all of a sudden it would stop doing that. It would stop replying. So that ended up becoming problematic. So in order to address that, I just got this 16 gigabyte used server that now is just sitting in my house, and it allows me to just access Hermes, my AI agent, whenever I need it. And it's perfect. So there's no need for a MacBook Mini, at least for me. I don't have any desire to run local models. I've been having super success with the OpenAI Pro membership for like 20 bucks a month. That's probably what 80% of my inference is running on. And then as well as when I hit those rate limits, I end up using some of the cheaper Chinese models. So DeepSeek V4 Flash is probably the one I use the most. I've used DeepSeek Pro. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't think it's that much better than the Flash, to be honest. And Xiaomi Pro, that has actually been pretty good too. So those are kind of what I use. I'm actually pretty happy with the Telegram interface. And yeah, overall, it's been making my life a lot easier. One of the things that I found was that the community itself is pretty weird. On the one side, it's the super fans that basically say Hermes is going to change everything. It's completely different than anything you've ever seen. And then you also have people that are really struggling to get any value out of it, where it's like, why is this even more useful than like ChatGPT or whatever? But at the same time, it's interesting, it's kind of good stuff. So following along with that, prior to that, I was using a lot of OpenClaw. I think the thing about OpenClaw is that its community is maybe a little bit more realistic because honestly, it's just a lot more hard to use. So I've found that Hermes, you really can just chat with it and you don't have to do any like crazy juggling with how to set up like the skills as well as all this crazy markdown stuff. I feel like with Hermes, it just kind of does everything a lot easier. Having said that, my experience with Claw was, I want to say 4 months ago. Like in the grand scheme of things, these projects are brand new, so could have gotten a lot better since then, but I've been super happy with Hermes since. I also think that this whole loop engineering thing is a bit overhyped. Kind of the concept that is kind of going around the internet is the idea of like, how can you have a loop so the agent can just do everything. So you imagine like a full cycle where the agent comes up with the idea to do, they create a ticket. After they create a ticket, they implement the ticket, then they create the PR, then they review the PR, and then maybe you have a human review it too. That's probably a good idea. But like in a startup, like maybe it's just like, yeah, it looks good to me, and you just press the button and then it's deployed and everything is all good to go, and then the agent goes on to the next thing. And in my opinion, I mean, like maybe it makes sense in some contexts where you have these narrow loops where it's really well defined and you know exactly what you're trying to do and what the goals are and the trade-offs of all these things. But I think in practice, it really, unfettered loops really just is like building a bunch of trash for other people, whether the trash is like content on the internet that nobody's going to look at, or the trash is just code that maybe is going to cause bugs and have to be maintained. I feel like without having the human in the loop, and that's what it's all about, right? Human in the loop is like, have the human be one of the key steps, have them be verifying the fact that it's doing something useful. So what hasn't worked for me is full cycle loops of everything, but what has been a lot more effective for me is just thinking about things in terms of triggers, where it's like, how can I make it so when something happens, something automatically happens with my agent. My agent picks it up and it starts the process, and then it gets to the point where a human should get involved, and then I get involved. So maybe the first thing that I started with was just like these one-off research cases where I wanted to do something maybe a little bit tedious and have Hermes do all the grunt work of figuring that out. So one concrete example was I wrote a book a while ago. I was looking to do a promo using a very specific vendor that offers these promotions, and on Reddit you could find maybe 18 different posts that basically were people's experiences with this particular vendor. So I think that overall that vendor had some mixed reviews. Some people really loved it, some people hated it, but overall it was an approach that I was planning to do, and I wanted to understand what the trade-offs were and any best practices. So basically I fired off Hermes. I had it crawl all of these different posts. I had it aggregate all the information into a table where it's all normalized and is easy to read, and I can skim this one post that has the information about how people on the internet have had success or failure with this and all the learning lessons that all of them had. And it helped me understand what I should expect from the promo campaign that I ended up running. I think that overall, I think the completeness of the data set allowed me to be much more data driven, to have more of those metrics. But ultimately, I don't think it really changed much of the output or the situation. But I think that it gave me some better understanding of the situation, as well as helped me know that I was taking into account all of the different sources for it. But the pattern that's really starting to click with me is this pattern that I started for scouting information. And for example, I'm looking for a new apartment and I want to find an apartment that's better than where I currently live and it's within my budget. It's in a certain school district that's really good for my daughter, and it has all of these criteria. It's good lighting. So historically, I've swiped through Zillow. I've looked at all these things. I end up looking at, I want to say 25 places before I find one that's interesting. I show it to my wife, Natalie, and then she takes a look at it and she's like, I don't like this thing about it. The whole process is extremely tedious, and there's just a lot of just garbage to kind of go through and filter out. And that's exactly what AI is just great at. So like these scouting loops that I set up, it's every day for the apartment finder one. I think it's at 8 o'clock in the morning. It goes around and it looks for all these new listings that fit all the criteria. It looks at the time it takes me to drive from that location to my office. So it will use like the Google Maps API to actually map that all out and come up with the estimate. It looks at the photos, make sure that the lighting is good in the place. It looks at the school district. It looks at all the things that I care about, filters out all the places that don't fit. And now all of a sudden, instead of having 120 different places, all of which are pretty garbage, I have an email that goes out every day and it has 1 to 3 places to look at. And you know, it's like when you think about this whole like loop engineering stuff, well, the hard part of the loop wasn't the actual going to the apartment. It wasn't actually booking the appointment. It's not the emails back and forth. It's really finding these gems. And I found that this scouting, this ability for AI to go out and curate this like very intentional set of data makes it super, super useful. And now I get these email digests to me that are sent out on a regular schedule, and I don't even think about it. And then whenever I have the chance, I look at it and it's like, hey, this place looks good. Let me set up an apartment viewing and things like that. So now I'm starting to get into more content creation because I feel like it just becomes a lot easier. I can use like Whisper to dictate just some of my ideas. It can quickly synthesize them into something that's coherent and create something like a LinkedIn post, create something like a blog post, something like that. And I started playing around with infographics, and that's another thing that like Hermes is great at. So there's all these different services that exist. I mean, like they always existed. So it's like you can go to Canva and you can figure out how to build an infographic, and you can probably come up with one that's good. But like for something like on your LinkedIn post, like, are you really caring that much about it? Like, probably not, you know, for something like that, that's just kind of like a nice to have where you're just like reminding your network that you're like, hey, I'm still around. And maybe in a couple years, I might be asking you for like an intro or something like that. Like, you want to keep your network warm, but you also don't really want to spend a whole lot of time just thinking about how do you build content to just kind of like entertain people that you haven't talked to in a really long time, you know? But for like these infographics on LinkedIn, it's like super easy. There's a service Baoyu that creates pretty cool infographics. And now I can just pump into my Hermes agent. I say, hey, like, create an infographic along the ideas of this blog post. And it'll just come up with, hey, how about this one? You know, I don't like it. And then we go back and forth and it generates a new one, you know, and it comes up with something that's actually pretty good. And there's different formats. So I started playing with, hey, like, what if I have these little social cards where instead of having it, it's almost like a little slide that sort of can go, it's exactly the size of the feed screen. And it's super easy. It ends up creating a whole web page that has all of these elements, takes a screenshot, crops it, does all these things, but it looks incredible. And I mean, all this stuff is definitely possible with Canva. But the thing is that you just come up with an idea, you send it an inspiration of an image, and you say, I want to make something that looks kind of like this, but with this other content idea. And it just kind of like puts it up. So it's like you just start keeping track of like a swipe file of like, oh, this is good. Maybe I'll want to do something like this someday. And now I have the ability to like just manufacture these images, these diagrams, these things whenever I want. And you think about like all the times that you're just at work and you have to like build a diagram for all of these different concepts. And it's like, well, now that you sort of start to see how these diagrams can be built easily, you realize the different strategies that are in place, and you just get better at sort of this visual thinking, you know. One of the things that I found was surprisingly useful was creating just like a weekly industry summary of like, hey, what have people in the industry been talking about over the past week? So basically what it does is it uses this skill called last 30 days to find all the most upvoted and most controversial posts that have been posted on places like Reddit and Twitter. And it comes up with the analysis of like, hey, this is what people are talking about, and these are the arguments that people are having. And I started reading this email that goes out automatically to me on Sundays, and it's super useful because it gives me insight on like, how is AI changing what it means to be a software engineer? How is it changing what it means to be an engineering manager? How does it change the entire company as a whole? How is it changing like the society we live in? Like, it's kind of a weird time, but like now as I'm getting these weekly emails, it's really useful for me to be able to just kind of like see that. And after reading it, I realized, hey, maybe this is useful for somebody else. So I started posting that on my Substack. So now there's this post, and I curate it a little bit. I make some edits to it, but overall it's mostly just the content that is coming out of Hermes. And I wouldn't have had the time to look at all these specific Reddit threads and to actually filter out all these things, but it's giving me some pretty good insights on these discussions that are happening about these controversial and kind of interesting things in the industry that I work in. I also had this idea for a product and for a side project, and I just had Hermes just one shot it. So actually it took me 2 tries. So the first try, basically what I ended up doing is, so I use this editor called proofeditor.ai. It's really pretty cool. So in short, it's a document that works mostly in like the markdown format. It's pretty bare bones, but it allows you to make comments and it allows you to use like some basic formatting stuff. But the thing that's really powerful about it is these comments are not really designed for another human, although you can invite other people, but you collaborate with your agent. So you can have this document and then you start working in this document, making changes to it, and then you can ask the agent to address the comments or change these things and iterate on top of it. So I've been using that proof editor, which has been fantastic, and I ended up using that to generate a PRD for this side project idea. So the first time that I built it, I built a fairly simple PRD, and it one-shotted it, and it basically built what I wanted to have. There were a couple of decisions that it made because it went off on its own and it made all of the decisions, and I didn't like a couple of them. So one, the design was really bad, so it didn't look good at all. And then the other piece of the problem was the fact that I would have preferred that it used a tech stack that I was a little more familiar with. I wasn't going to be coding in it, but if something happened with it, being able to have that skill to kind of like go under the hood and understand it was something that was worthwhile for me. So I decided the second round to specify more of the information about like, hey, this is what the database schema looks like. This is what the design layout should be. This is the technology stack that I want you to pick. So it's like the PRD plus the technical design doc. And I iterated on that doc, dictated a lot of the ideas, and eventually we got this PRD. Then I gave it the PRD, and then it one-shotted the app, and I ended up making a few tweaks here and there, but by and large it's pretty much the gist of what it came out with originally. And I mean, it's a simple app, it doesn't do much. It's really just like a one feature application, but overall it kind of spun something up really fast. And yeah, I think that it kind of goes to show you the ability of these tools to actually do some of the coding as well. If you give it very clear instructions in terms of what you want, it's pretty remarkable what it's able to build. The real unlock for me isn't like the loop engineering or anything crazy. It really just comes down to a few steps, right? First thing is you just kind of play around with it and you teach it to do something once. You treat it like a one-off. You just think, hey, this is something where AI could potentially help you. Then you can end up saving it as a skill, or you end up saving it as a cron task to happen automatically. But the Hermes agent itself kind of deals with all that. And you just say, hey, remember how to do this for next time, write a skill. And it'll go in the background, create the skill. And then when you ask it, hey, can you do that thing that you did before? It just knows how to do it. And then you can just let it run on the schedule, or you can trigger it manually and you just stop thinking about it. So I think that's what it really does for me. Like right now it's doing some of this like apartment scouting. It does some of these emails. I have a few other little tasks as well as some of this like content creation stuff. I used it pretty heavily to build this video, to iterate on some of the ideas. I use it a lot for some of these like whisper dictations. It doesn't change everything. It's not like, hey, this is the secret bullet for everything, but it's like all of a sudden you have the ability to automate stuff in a way that kind of wouldn't have been possible in any other way. And I think that as you get better at it, you start to see more use cases where you're like, hey, I wonder how Hermes can handle this. Like, I want to play with it to kind of learn how that happens and kind of keep iterating on top of it. So that's kind of been my experience with Hermes, and I've been loving it. And yeah, for like a normal person like me that doesn't really have any crazy advanced stuff, I think that the cost of running all this local inference and all the GPUs and stuff is extremely excessive and kind of crazy. I think going on the Facebook Marketplace and getting a used server that just can be on all the time, it's been super good for me, as well as these other subscriptions like the OpenAI one. I had it anyway, and then a couple other little bonus add-ons for like DeepSeek and Xiaomi. And I mean, like, that is maybe $10 a month, $15 a month, if that. Overall, I think that it's been going good. I've talked about a few different things that I've done, so I'll add a link in the description for if you want to look at like, hey, what does the email look like that comes out of the email scout, as well as just a handful of these different artifacts that I'm sort of building on a regular basis. And kind of the key is not that these things are like the best ever, but it's just like, this kind of goes to show you like, hey, this took minimal effort. I don't really care that much. And this just kind of knocked it out pretty fast. So take a look at some of the stuff. I'll include it. And yeah, if this has been helpful, I would really appreciate it if you either like the video or follow me for more videos. All right, take it easy. See ya.